everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I am very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion that I happened to meet a few months back in Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Janeya Griffin. Miss Griffin is known as the Commercializer. She is a serial entrepreneur, pure strategist, social justice, IP, and STEM advocate. And she is commercializing technology and helping people and organizations monetize their intellectual property and intellectual assets. Ms. Griffin does all of this while changing the stigma and the narrative associated with how society views people with criminal histories, and most importantly, how people with criminal histories view themselves. Previously, Ms. Griffin had a contracting job with NASA where she developed her current passions. I am extremely honored and excited to share Ms. Griffin's journey today with you all and speak with her. Welcome, Ms. Griffin. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of leaders.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and I can't wait to jump in. And that was a phenomenal bio that you did on me, so thanks.
Yeah, she has so many skills. I was like, you have so many awards that I didn't want to, if I kept listening, it would go for like hours and hours. So, but you're so qualified and everything. You did so much at such a young age. But, before we get into how you got so inspired and motivated to get into the aerospace industry, could you first tell us a little bit more about your typical day? I know there's usually not a typical day, but how does it usually run for you?
Well, my typical day has changed tremendously because, as you grow up, you evolve and you learn to like different things. So typically for me, when the pandemic started, I actually turned my garage into a gym. So I didn't have to leave home, right? So I will, typically take a couple of my first calls, checking in with my team on my treadmill. So I got a desk that actually goes over the treadmill. So I'll, get my light walking in. And then I have breakfast. And so for breakfast, I actually love these acai bowls from Sam's Club. They're from a tattooed chef. And so they have like blueberries and raspberries and strawberries in them, and they're all frozen with acai. And so I eat that every morning, my most favorite meal of the day. And then I'll get with my team again and kind of just see what I have on my schedule for the day. So checking emails, scheduling meetings, looking at, payroll and different things like that you got to do in entrepreneurship now that I'm a full-time entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And you always try to keep yourself active and busy, even in your busy schedule, which is awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And also, let's get into what you did with the Commercializer. Could you tell us more about the consulting startup you founded and what was the inspiration behind founding it?
Yeah, so I actually started it, I would say the Commercializer is a moniker, right? As you said in my bio. And so that came about because I was traveling around the United States, basically going to minority-owned businesses in historically excluded communities and talking to them about the resources that the federal government has with technologies that they can license or facilities that they can use or subject matter experts that they can actually collaborate with. And the access that they had to that. And so I would fly around the country talking about that. And so I needed to have a more professional representation. And so that's how the Commercializer came into play, because I was like, well, what do I do? And I was like, well, I commercialize things. And so just to break that down, so I was a technology transfer specialist for NASA for about 8.5 years as a contractor. And what that means is the government spends every year $150 billion on research and development. And out of that development come inventions or innovations. And so somebody like me would work with patent attorneys and we would go out, we would get it patented, and then we would find the commercial companies to actually license the rights for those patents so that they can turn them into commercial products. And so as I started to go around and talk about all of the technologies or all of the patents that the federal labs had, specifically NASA, I would meet people along the way. And so I would always offer them help and different things. And so now that I'm no longer working at NASA, I've actually turned this into a space where I can actually consult and then make money off of it. Because before I was just a part of my job. And so now that all of the knowledge and everything that I've learned while working, with these institutions has really prepared me to be able to work with the commercial sector. And so now I help independent inventors find, ways that they can monetize their technologies or their inventions that they come up with. And then more specifically, I've been helping historically Black college universities, which are HBCUs, set up their own tech transfer offices. So that is a
Your voice got cut off a little bit. I can't hear you. Kind of. Oh, now I can hear you again. I can hear you. Sorry, you got frozen for a second.
Okay. Did you get everything?
No, you were talking about the underrepresented communities, and then I cut off from there. So you specifically focus on underrepresented communities.
Yes. So I work with independent inventors. You heard that part?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I work with independent inventors who have their own inventions or own ideas, and they're trying to figure out how to get it out to market, how to commercialize it. And then HBCUs, historically Black college universities, I've been working with them to help them build out what their tech transfer office will look like. So the same thing that a NASA or a Department of Defense is doing with their federal labs, but it's just at a university institution. And so the other thing that I started to do was really focus on, bridging the gap between resources and then historically excluded communities, specifically when it comes to technology, when it comes to, science and STEM. What does that look like? Because over the years, I've grown a really wide range, let me say that, a wide range of a network where I have, access to investors, entrepreneurs, founders of color, people who are really doing like the tech work, the STEM fields. And so I started to see a trend where I know that there are spaces and places where people don't necessarily frequent as much when it comes to giving out this information. And so I wanted to, basically, I took it upon myself to make that my mission, to spread that wealth of information to my community. And so with that, I really started to dig into space technologies, what that looks like. And then I came across an organization called TRISH, which is the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And they actually get funding from NASA to find entrepreneurs or, non-traditional principal investigators to do research on things that NASA is very interested in, but is not technically funding. And so, so I got with them to kind of get more people of color interested and aware of all of the resources that they have available, so that they could take advantage of those. And so that's it's a consortium. It's a consortium of MIT, Baylor College of Medicine, and Caltech, which is where JPL is located.
Wow, that's simply incredible. As you were talking, I was just mind blown by how much that your consulting firm does and how you got to the stage. I mean, I'm really curious. Did you have a tough time kind of initially starting this, idea and formulating it into like a real world application based company that has a lot of clientele? Like, was it a difficult process for you?
I wouldn't say it was difficult because I think it just became organic. Like I said, at first it was just a moniker, a professional moniker that people learned to know me by. And so because I built that brand, that type of professional brand, now when they have issues or they have questions around intellectual property or around, diversity in space, different things like that, they come to me because I've been talking about it for so long. So I think because I've kind of established myself as a thought leader in that space, it is easier now for people to either recommend me or, refer me or say, hey, can you provide more insight around X, Y, and Z? So I think that it's just really been organic because of the information and the education that I've been providing in terms of the content. So yeah, I mean, outside of that, it probably would be, because there's still a lot of people that don't necessarily know me, but a lot of the contracts that I've won have been based off of referrals.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I would say connections are definitely key in maintaining them. And so, as a female business leader, female in the aerospace industry, have you ever felt, like you were looked down upon or not trusted enough for your skills just because of your gender, or was that never an issue for you?
I think that this industry, because, and I will just say this, so when Hidden Figures came out, the movie, I was approached and they were like, hey, they want me to come and talk to kids. And I was just like, I don't think that that's me. Like, I don't think that that should be, because I've never had that type of experience. But what I will say is that I know people who have, right? And so it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that the people who were, there before me got it to a point where I didn't have to go through, something like that, to where it wasn't, the norm, and it wasn't always happening all the time, right? The other thing I think is specifically because of the sub industry, I guess, that I'm in. So I am in the aerospace industry, but I'm not vying for an engineer's position. Right? I'm not, there is no competition. There is no, I'm not intimidating anybody, So I think that because of that, and because like I'm more of in a supportive role, like I'm treated differently, right? Now, if I was, an engineer, or if I was in a position that was coming for a very male dominated field, then like I could see like where that could I probably would have ran into that. But because of the position that I was in, I never experienced that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that that wasn't an experience for you, but thank you for providing that like insight on, why you might have not faced it, whereas some other people do. And so I think that's definitely eye-opening for me as well. And so I also was reading how you co-founded a creative agency called ConCreates. Could you tell us more about this, organization and what it does?
So yeah, ConCreates is a creative agency. Obviously, we do marketing, strategy, branding, and we are powered by the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. So both of my parents ended up going to jail when I was 16, and I ended up having to take care of my 6-year-old younger brother at the time, which wasn't too long, but I just didn't, I was 16. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, I had a car. We were living with my grandfather at the time. So, I still had a house to go to, right? And so I think, that really propelled me into this line of work. But my mom could not find a job afterwards. And so she struggled. And so because she struggled, our whole family struggled. And so I didn't want to have to see anybody else go through that again. And so I really wanted to teach people who had criminal histories how to become entrepreneurs so that they never had to worry about getting rejected from a job again, if that's not something that they wanted to do, and so I ended up partnering with my co-founders, and they started it in prison, the idea, the concept of it. And one of them got out early, and then he met me, and then we started to build the company out. And then the other one came home, and then we built the company out even more. And so, we work with some pretty big organizations now. We actually just had one of our campaigns show up in The Last OG, which is a series on TBS with Warner Media. And we got to place on a platform, I guess, highlight formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs who have already been doing, really great things and who have made impacts within their own communities. And so that was really fulfilling for me.
Wow, I actually did not know about this for your background. Like, I think one thing that I love about talking with diverse individuals and sharing their stories is everyone has a completely different background. You can
Yeah.
read someone's CV, you can read someone's resume and be like, wow, they did all of this, but there's a lot of things behind it, their inspiration or their, personal experiences that shaped their
Mhm.
character and their personality. And just hearing that from you is just like, it was like very, it was inspiring for me. I mean, how did that, like, when your parents did go to jail, how was that experience for you growing? I mean, you still became an extremely successful person. Were there obstacles at that time? I'm sure there were, but how were you able to overcome that experience? And like, what advice would you give for students who might be in a similar position or have had that similar situation?
Yeah. So just to be honest, I thought it was normal for the longest. I did not feel like I had a story. I just was like, well, my mom is gone, my dad was gone, and they were only gone for like 3 weeks, a month. It was, like they went on vacation, right? But I didn't know when they were coming back. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that I couldn't speak to my parents. I couldn't see them. And, as a big sister, I think the family values that they instilled in me just showed up indirectly, because and it was something that like was already in me. I think I've always helped my brother with his homework. I've always, made him food. I've always, gave him a bath or took him to school. Like I just did the things that I normally did because, hey, my mom's not here. Okay, boom. So I need to do this. I need to do X, Y, and Z. And so that was, it wasn't not normal. And so, over the years, I guess, as I grew up, I think that the most difficult part for me, where it really like extremely impacted my life, not from a subconscious, I think subconsciously that probably like bothered me or messed with me as I grew up, and those are things that we probably have to heal from. But as I got older, going through that experience and seeing my mom go through depression and lose her self-esteem because she couldn't get a job, right? And it created such a like we butt heads. Like it created a very bad environment and bad energy within our relationship, within our family. And I say this to this day, that was the worst time of my life. And I feel that, and that was before I actually started working at NASA. So I came home to help her, pay the bills because she couldn't afford it. She couldn't afford to take care of my brother. So I took care of, my brother for that time when I was 16. And then I came home after college. And then I took care of her and my brother again. And so that was a very, very like traumatic time of my life, because I didn't have a room, right? I slept on the couch. I lived out of my suitcase. And I had an internship, right, at a sheriff's department. This was before I got the job at NASA. I knew that I wanted to go into tech transfer, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And so I just was taking like, okay, hey, here's this internship at the sheriff's department. You're gonna be a computer tech. And I'm like, okay. So that's what I did. And it was an hour and 15 minutes away from my house. And I was making like $12 an hour driving one way. That's an hour, 15 minutes each way. And so that's why I said that was one of like the worst times of my life, because like it was just so much pressure, so many things on me. And then on top of all of that, my mom was going through depression. And I had never experienced depression. I had never, didn't know what it was, didn't know how to label it. And so we got into it because I would be like, why are you on the couch? You're in the same spot when I come home. I need you to, go out and find a job. I need you to do it. And so I didn't understand it, until she started going to therapy. And then we had a therapy session. We sat down and she was able to explain it to me. And so, I feel that if I would have knew about it or been educated about what depression is and how it shows up, that I could have, supported her in a different way. But I think, you know, without going through all of that, I would never be where I am today. I would never have, you know, joined up with my co-founders to build ConCreates. I would never have done anything, right, that I'm doing right now. And so I think, you know, the lesson that I learned was that like everything happens for you, right? It doesn't happen to you, it happens for you to put you in a position to where you need to be for where you need to go. So everything is happening in your favor, right? It may not make sense at that moment. It may be horrible. You're gonna feel pain, you know, just all of these different things, but that is really setting you up to be experienced for where you need to go in life and where you need to be later on down the road. So I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful for even experiencing all of that and going through all of that and learning the way that I did. I kind of wish that that you know, I didn't have to, but you know, yeah, everything happens, you know, for you, and everything happens the way that it should, when it's supposed to, how it's supposed to. And so the other thing that I would say is it doesn't last forever, right? It's temporary. Whatever storm you're going through, whatever issues, it's all temporary. And so really just understanding that like it's always going to work out.
Wow, I'm simply speechless. That was so powerful, and I do have to say, it's personally, it's the values you grew up with that made you who you are today. I think it's like your strong personality, because you know some people who go through similar situations as you, they fall into that trap or that misery as well, and they don't come out of it. But you chose to help your family. You chose to be that rock and like support your mother, support your siblings, and I think that's so empowering. I mean, not everyone. Some people have. I mean, now I'm like thinking about my life. I'm like, I'm so blessed to, you know, not have gone through those struggles. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, you grew so much from those like skills that you've learned, and you were able to become stronger. You're able to support a community that you personally have, you know, been connected with. And I think that's extremely inspiring. Like I'm personally very speechless. Like that's amazing. I think you have a great journey, and I can't wait to see like everywhere that you go. I think that's amazing. I'm sorry, I'm like speechless right now. That was really beautiful. I'm sure your parents are extremely proud of all that you're doing now.
Yeah, they tell me that often. But I always say, you know, and going back to, you know, the things that you just said right now, I think that you know, it's because that I've been giving, right? Because I've served, because I've been selfless in certain situations, that has come back to me tenfold. You know, the universe provides, you know, so what you put out is what you get back. And so I'm very intentional about making sure that I am putting out positive energy, positive vibes, helping people when I can, because I do believe that that's a part of my purpose.
Yeah, and when I saw you in Atlanta, you were the most upbeat, most cheerful person ever. I could have never imagined in a million years that you had this experience that made you who you are today. And I think that positive energy is like what lights up everyone. And so that's amazing. And you know, I'm curious, like, how did you get into space? Because you said you were interested in tech and you knew you wanted to work at NASA. So the question kind of comes of where did that inspiration kind of come from?
So I will say I didn't know that I wanted to work at NASA. I knew that I wanted to work in tech transfer. But rewinding back to when I went to when I graduated, right before I graduated high school, excuse me. I did a apprenticeship program at NASA, the same center that I got hired at. So full circle moment, right? And so I did an internship there my junior year of high school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but this was a way for me to figure it out. And I was like, you know what? I want to be a computer tech, right? Another full circle moment. And then I was just like, okay, so I started doing some research to see, you know, how much do computer techs make, and like, what do I need to do? And it wasn't that much. I looked at the salary and I was like, ooh, computer techs don't make that much money. I might have to rethink this, right? But computer engineers, they make a lot of money. And it was right next to it. So I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So I checked that. That's what I want to do. So I did my apprenticeship. They put me in a Sims lab. And I was around coders, programmers all day. And I was just like, this is not what I want to do. At that moment, I learned that like I did not want to be a computer programmer, because all they did was sit behind a computer and they coded all day. They didn't talk to people. Then I was just like, I can't live like this. I'm too much of a social butterfly, you know? Yeah. And so that lesson for me was like, you know, I had to learn who I was not to learn who I was, right? And so that I think that stuck with me forever, but it was because I went out and I actually tried. So after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do computer engineering. But after school, I will always go to this, they had like this class on crime scene investigation. So you could like play around, solve crimes and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I love this. I couldn't wait to always go. So I was like, I want to be a crime scene investigator. So that is exactly what I went to college for, that in the beginning. And so I graduated from Grambling State University in HBCU in Louisiana. And I got 2 degrees, one in criminal justice and the other in chemistry with a concentration in forensic science. So I was clearly on the path to become a forensic scientist. And I ended up doing 2 internships at police departments again. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to stare at dead bodies all day. You know, this is cool. I don't think I want to be in the lab. I want to impact, and I just don't know what that looks like, but this isn't it. So, so after I ended up getting into a program at Cal State University, San Bernardino, the dean of my college, my chemistry college at that time, he told me, he said, Janeya, you know, I don't think you can have a boss. And I said, well, Dr. Hubbard, I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or, you know, what you're trying to say here. And so he was just like, you need to apply to this fellowship for entrepreneurs. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so I ended up applying. I got in. They took STEM students from HBCUs and they taught us all about business, right? So I could talk the technical, scientific language, but I could translate that now into a business proposition that business people, or a value proposition, excuse me, that business people would be able to understand. So at that point, that's when I found out about tech transfer and federal labs and all of this. And because I could use everything that I knew and loved about making connections, I was like, I want to do this. And so I set out and I started like applying to all of these jobs. And so tech transfer, licensing associate, all of this stuff. And they're like, you need to have 3 years of experience for an entry level job. And I was just like, I just graduated. How am I supposed, like, this doesn't even make sense. So I'm like, you know what? I have theoretical knowledge, but I don't have like the practical. So what I did was I found a consultant in the tech transfer space. And I said, hey, I'll work for you for free if you just teach me about X, Y, and Z, right? And so literally had conversations with him, you know, had some meetings with him. And then I could technically say that, you know, I've been exposed to all of the things that they were looking for. And so I put that on my resume and then I got the job, right? So the same NASA center that I worked at as an apprentice was the same NASA center that reached out to me to hire me. And they literally tailored the position to fit my resume. And so it was like, it was crazy. So I was never the one that was like, I want to work for NASA. NASA is my dream. I just so happened to end up there. And then I was there for 8.5 years after that. But, you know, once I got that job, then I could breathe, right? I started, you know, I had a little bit of a life, because before I didn't have a life. All I was doing was driving back and forth to work on an internship salary, taking care of my mom and my brother. And so when I got that job, it was like a sigh of relief. So yeah, I think, did that answer your question? Because I know okay.
No, that definitely answered the question. That was like definitely like a unconventional path, but I'm so glad you found your home and you love what you're doing. And definitely the entrepreneur part, you know, you're very social and you can communicate, so you can take the most complicated things and break it down to people who may not have that scientific background. And because you're very good at it, being an entrepreneur is literally going to the business path would have been the perfect path. So I'm glad your professor or like the chemistry dean identified that.
Yes. It was because of him for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad. And, kind of getting, now that we've kind of learned a little bit about your journey, I'm curious from your experience and expertise, what makes you excited and what makes you nervous for the future of the aerospace industry?
Ooh, so what makes me excited is that we are developing a new economy. And also what makes me excited is there is an opportunity for there to be a level of equity that doesn't necessarily exist currently in this stage, right? What was the other one? What scares me?
What makes you, yes, yeah.
What makes me nervous, right? What makes me nervous is that if we do not start to get those people who are in historically excluded communities involved with this new space economy that is developing, what makes me nervous is that we will be yet on another planet still begging for diversity, equity, and inclusion all over again. And so I really want to start to educate people about space, right? About how it will play a role in what they're doing, even though they may not see it now, right? How it actually plays a role now in the everyday things that we use that come from NASA that we don't necessarily even realize that come from there, like this little tiny camera that we're using, right? That came from NASA. There's a lot of different things. And so, I think we're so far removed from that. And not, you don't know what you don't know. And so because we're so far removed, we think that it's not for us. We think that we're spending too much money on it, and we don't understand why, right? We don't understand why we're spending money to go to space or different things, when really we spend more money, or it costs more money in chapstick a year. So we spend more money in chapstick a year than it costs to send somebody to space right now. And so I think what they're doing is trying to decrease that cost. And so the way that you do that is by continuing to be innovative. You see everything that's happening at SpaceX. What also makes me nervous is that the contracts that people are getting, like the SpaceX and the Blue Origin and the Virgin Galactic, will continue to be homogenous, right? They will not be given or shared with Black-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses that could also be doing this work, because outside of just the diversity in race and ethnicity, there is a diversity in thought. And when you grow up in a different culture, there's different traditions, there's different ways of thinking, there's different problems that are being solved, and different solutions, different ways to solve those problems, right? And I think we need to have that diversity of thought across the board. We need to have the diversity in the way that things show up, because, we don't necessarily know how the space environment is going to react to different people. So it might be different for you and me, right? The atmosphere might affect me differently than it does you, we just don't know. And so really creating a representation that is similar to the representation that we have on Earth, so that when we do go to space, that, everybody is, has a seat at the table.
Yeah, well, those are definitely valid concerns and things I've actually been thinking about myself. So hopefully we can solve those problems now before we continue to expand the commercialization space, so we can continue to grow more diverse ecosystem. And my last and final question for you, which I ask every person who comes onto the podcast, is what final piece, you've given plenty throughout this interview, but what final piece of advice do you have for young students around the world who are trying to pursue a career in the aerospace industry, STEM field, really just any career, something that you wish someone told you when you were in high school or undergraduate?
Something that I wish, find out what you're passionate about. I think that if I would have figured out what I was passionate about very early on in my life, if I could have actually identified it, right, and gave it a name and labeled it and said, I am passionate about this, right? So when I was in the program, I was able to do that. And my passion was establishing connections. And so I could break that down to say, establishing connections by connecting with people, by connecting the dots, by solving problems. As I look back amongst the things that I did, everything that I liked doing was problem solving. Everything that I liked. I loved math, not initially, but after. Once I figured out the concept, I loved math because it was problem solving. I wanted to do crime scene investigation because it was problem solving. I wanted to be a computer tech because it was problem solving, right? Knowing what I was passionate about. If I would have known that earlier in life, I think it would have been a lot easier. And now that I know that that is my passion, I'm very intentional about making sure that I'm doing that in any industry, in anything that I'm doing, so that I love it. Because if I love what I'm doing, I will never really work a day in my life. That's how I think about it, right? And so everything that I've done and been able to do, I can say that I've been very blessed to feel that I love it, right? I love the work that I do. I love the jobs that I had. There was never a job that I had that I didn't necessarily love. But I just got to a point where I knew that I could no longer evolve or grow in that position. And so, it stopped serving me. I started to serve it. And so it was time for me to go. But I think the biggest thing is just understanding what you're passionate about, finding what your purpose is, right? If I had tried to and been intentional about figuring that out early on, and just wondering, what is my purpose? Asking those questions, being curious, that probably would have saved me a lot of different things. However, everything happens for you. Everything happens the way it should. So, that was my journey. But yeah, I think now knowing that I'm very passionate about problem solving, you can put me in any industry, you can put me in any job. As long as I'm solving a problem, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Like, try figuring out what you love to do so that way, you can start early, you can figure out what you really want to do and get deep into it. And I think that's definitely something that everyone in middle school and high school should be like really focused on trying to find. I know, of course, it changes over time. So there's no like, oh, you have to find it. But like just thinking about that idea of like, what do I really like to do and getting into it, I think is really important. So I want to thank you so much for your time, Ms. Griffin. Like, I honestly was extremely inspired and I learned so much about you that I could not have ever known if I did not talk with you directly. So I want to thank you so much for taking your time. I'm sure everyone who's listening is extremely inspired by your work, and I can't wait to see that all that you continue to accomplish in the future.
And I want to thank you because this has been such a phenomenal conversation. And I am just so not just inspired, but I'm in awe, right? That, you're so young and successful. And, it's just amazing to see you doing very well and to see, the younger generation really providing a lot of insight, right? Because just as much as you've learned from me, I've learned from you. And so I really want to thank you for even giving me this space and sharing this space with me and putting me on your platform.
Thank you so much. Yeah.